Stepping over the threshold of a sprawling, glass-walled mega-mansion, the first thing that hits your senses isn't the scent of fresh-cut marble or expensive imported teak. It's an absolute, deafening silence. No frenzied bidding wars, no desperate buyers waving inspections, no champagne corks popping in celebration. Just the echoing sound of luxury real estate dreams shattering across the United States. The golden era of blind money chasing infinity pools, indoor basketball courts, and climate-controlled wine cellars has violently shifted gears, leaving the nation's most prestigious housing markets paralyzed, bleeding equity, and utterly desperate. Taking a cross-country road trip through the 10 American cities where the upper-tier property sector is essentially on life support reveals exactly how the wealthy are getting crushed under the weight of astronomical holding costs and vanishing buyer demand. Navigating these struggling, overpriced metros offers a brutally honest look at the cold mechanics of a high-end housing bust, giving anyone looking to protect their hard-earned assets a serious education in what happens when the cheap money music suddenly stops. Spotting these localized red flags is absolutely crucial for keeping your own financial portfolio out of the real estate blast zone. Because somewhere further down this journey, a once untouchable southern tech haven is currently staring down the barrel of a catastrophic 51% price collapse, wiping out years of supposed generational wealth in a matter of months. Uncovering the fatal flaws of these specific markets might just save your future investments from complete and utter ruin. Consider the fundamental illusion that built the modern American luxury market. For over a decade, 0% interest rates and endless liquidity convinced an entire class of investors that high-end real estate was a one-way ratchet. If you bought a $5 million modern farmhouse in a trendy zip code, you weren't just buying shelter, you were buying an appreciating asset that would magically absorb inflation and yield endless passive capital. But that entire narrative rested on a single fragile pillar: cheap debt and frictionless mobility. The moment central banks slammed the brakes on monetary expansion, the entire architecture of the upper-tier housing market didn't just slow down, it seized up. The leverage that amplified gains on the way up is now acting as a giant, crushing anvil on the way down. When you look closely at the math behind a high-end property collapse, you realize that luxury real estate doesn't behave like standard starter homes. A median-priced suburban property has a flaw created by basic human necessity. People always need a place to live, work, and raise families. But a $10 million secondary or tertiary residence has no natural flaw. It is entirely a product of discretionary excess. When tech stock valuations contract, when corporate bonuses dry up, or when the cost of capital quadruples, the buyer pool for these trophy assets doesn't shrink by 10 or 20%. It completely vanishes overnight. Yet, while the buyers evaporate, the carrying costs do not. In fact, they explode. The public sees the listing price drops, but what they miss are the quiet, brutal holding costs that eat high-net-worth sellers alive from the inside out. Property taxes reassessed at peak valuations, property insurance premiums skyrocketing as climate risks and construction costs climb, routine maintenance on 50,000 square foot estates, and specialized homeowners association assessments. A luxury mansion sitting vacant isn't just an idle asset. It is a burning furnace consuming tens of thousands of dollars in cash every single month. The psychological shift happens when a trophy asset turns into a liability so heavy that even ultra-wealthy individuals begin to panic. This isn't merely a localized story about a few unlucky sellers losing a slice of their equity. This is a macroeconomic warning signal flashing red across the entire American financial landscape. The luxury housing sector is the canary in the economic coal mine. It is the very first segment to react when smart money decides to de-risk, and its collapse exposes the deep structural vulnerabilities hidden beneath the surface of the broader economy. What is happening right now in these 10 key metropolitan areas is changing the rules of real estate investment for the next decade. The era of speculative luxury flipping is dead, And understanding why requires dissecting the specific, fatal mistakes made in cities that were once considered entirely bulletproof. To understand how the American luxury housing market arrived at this systemic freeze, it is necessary to examine the series of monetary decisions, legislative mandates, and geographic migration patterns that engineered the bubble between March 2020 and late 2022. The structural vulnerability began on March 15, 2020, when the Federal Reserve slashed the federal funds target rate to a range of 0.00% to 0.25%. This near-zero interest rate policy, combined with over $4.6 trillion in federal stimulus injection and monthly mortgage-backed security purchases by the central bank, flooded the private banking sector with unprecedented capital liquidity. Simultaneously, the widespread adoption of remote work policies across the technology and financial services sectors triggered a massive capital reallocation. High-earning households in high-tax, high-cost metropolitan areas began liquidating primary residences in markets like San Francisco and New York to acquire higher square footage properties in lower tax jurisdictions. Cities such as Austin, Miami, Nashville, Las Vegas, and Denver experienced artificial demand spikes that decoupled home valuations from local median wage growth. In Austin, Texas, median single-family home prices surged by over 50% in under 24 months, driven heavily by corporate relocations, including Tesla moving its headquarters to Travis County in December 2021 and Oracle relocating its corporate headquarters in December 2020. However, the foundation of this expansion was compromised by two distinct structural catalysts: sudden monetary tightening and aggressive localized legislative shifts. The first shock occurred in March 2022, when the Federal Reserve initiated its most aggressive inflation-fighting campaign in 4 decades. Over the course of 16 months, the central bank raised benchmark interest rates 11 times, pushing the federal funds rate from near zero to a range of 5.25% to 5.50% by July 2023. Conventional 30-year fixed mortgage rates jumped from historic lows of 2.65% in January 2021 to over 7.7% by October 2023. For high-end real estate transactions involving heavy leverage or jumbo loans, this rate spike doubled or tripled monthly debt service requirements, instantly severing the purchasing power of mid-tier and entry-level luxury buyers. The second shock came from state and municipal policy changes that imposed massive mandatory holding costs and transaction fees directly onto premium property owners. In Florida, the turning point was the June 24, 2021, catastrophic structural collapse of the Champlain Towers South condominium in Surfside, which resulted in 98 fatalities. In response, the Florida legislature enacted Senate Bill 4D in May 2022, followed by cleanup legislation under Senate Bill 154 in May 2023. This law mandated that all condominium and cooperative buildings 3 or more stories in height undergo mandatory milestone structural inspections once reaching 30 years of age, or 25 years if located within 3 miles of the coastline. Crucially, the legislation eliminated the ability of condominium association boards to vote to waive or defer reserve funding for structural integrity components. Effective December 31, 2024, associations were required to maintain 100% funded reserves based on detailed structural integrity reserve studies. For oceanfront luxury condo towers in Miami Beach, this statutory shift triggered immediate special assessments ranging from $50,000 to over $350,000 per unit, while commercial property insurance premiums in coastal Florida escalated by 100% to 150% over a 2-year window. In Los Angeles, California, local municipal policy delivered a separate, self-inflicted blow to transaction velocity. In November 2022, Los Angeles voters passed Proposition ULA, officially known as the Homelessness and Housing Solutions Tax, which took effect on April 1, 2023. Commonly labeled the Mansion Tax, Measure ULA imposed a mandatory top-line seller transfer tax of 4% on all real property transactions exceeding $5 million, and a 5.5% tax on transactions exceeding $10 million, applied to the gross purchase price regardless of whether the seller realized a capital gain or a financial loss. In the final month before the April 1st deadline, luxury sellers scrambled to unload inventory, offering deep discounts and exotic incentives. Immediately following implementation, high-end residential sales volume in the city of Los Angeles plunged by more than 60% year-over-year. In Washington state, the tech-heavy economy of Seattle faced its own localized trap. Between 2022 and 2024, major technology employers headquartered in the region implemented massive workforce restructuring. Amazon eliminated over 27,000 corporate positions globally in early 2023, while Microsoft announced 10,000 corporate job cuts. The sudden contraction in tech sector equity compensation, combined with mandatory return-to-office orders, dismantled the buyer pool for high-end residential properties in surrounding luxury enclaves like Bellevue and Kirkland. A parallel dynamic unfolded in the vacation rental and speculative secondary home markets. In Sedona, Arizona, the rapid expansion of short-term vacation rentals transformed the local housing supply between 2020 and 2022. Investor capital flooded the market, converting single-family residential homes into dedicated short-term rental assets. When overall domestic leisure travel normalized and consumer spending shifted toward international destinations, occupancy rates dropped sharply, while municipal regulations tightened. Property owners who financed acquisitions at peak valuations were left with monthly debt obligations that exceeded net operating rental revenues. These converging historical events created a geographic trap. Developers in growth markets like Nashville, Denver, and Austin continued bringing speculative, high-end residential inventory to market throughout 2022 and 2023, based on multi-year development timelines initiated during the low-rate environment. By the time these luxury subdivisions, high-rise condominiums, and custom mega-mansions reached completion, the underlying economic conditions had completely inverted. The capital that entered these markets during the cheap money era was trapped, facing rising property taxes, expanding insurance liabilities, aggressive local regulation, and a complete absence of institutional or private liquidity. In early 2024, the operational realities across these 10 metropolitan markets hardened into an unprecedented structural gridlock. The friction between seller price expectations and institutional capital metrics created a complete freeze in transaction velocity. The upper-tier residential market entered a phase defined not merely by declining valuation curves, but by severe market illiquidity, soaring default risks, and a clash between municipal policy and private wealth preservation. In Miami Beach, Florida, the intersection of statutory engineering requirements and corporate risk management led directly to a market standstill. Following the enforcement of Senate Bill 4D, structural integrity audits revealed tens of millions of dollars in deferred maintenance across legacy oceanfront towers. For example, at a 40-unit luxury condominium building on Collins Avenue, structural engineers identified concrete spalling and post-tension cable corrosion, resulting in an immediate special assessment of $280,000 per unit owner. Unwilling or unable to absorb these cash calls, numerous high-net-worth owners listed their units simultaneously, causing active inventory in coastal Miami-Dade County to spike by 42% year-over-year. However, prospective institutional and private buyers, armed with specialized structural reports, demanded corresponding price reductions. According to Redfin data, closed sales volume for high-end coastal condos fell by 35%, while median days on market reached 115 days. Commercial property insurers further exacerbated the crisis by issuing non-renewal notices or doubling annual premiums, forcing property owners to carry extreme overhead costs without a liquid secondary market to exit. In Seattle, Washington, the crisis unfolded as a direct consequence of corporate restructuring and equity valuation shocks within the technology sector. The local high-end market had long been anchored by stock-based compensation packages granted to senior engineers and executives at firms like Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta. As tech companies initiated widespread layoffs and pivoted away from aggressive headcount expansion, the pool of qualified buyers capable of securing $3 million to $6 million mortgages severely contracted. Northwest Multiple Listing Service statistics indicated that active listings for high-end properties in King County rose 55%, while overall sales volume dropped 28%. In downtown Seattle, glassy high-rise luxury units faced a compounding commercial real estate crisis. With downtown office vacancy rates hovering around 24%, foot traffic declined, impacting retail corridors and undermining the premium value proposition of urban high-density luxury living. Zillow metrics confirmed a 12% drop in median luxury sales prices from peak pandemic levels, with buyers universally insisting on aggressive price concessions before submitting written offers. In Las Vegas, Nevada, the speculative luxury housing buffer completely collapsed under the weight of elevated borrowing costs. The market, heavily dependent on out-of-state buyers relocating from California, experienced a severe drop in transaction volume. Local Realtors Association data recorded a 40% decline in luxury home transactions compared to historical medians. According to Bankrate Financial Modeling, the shift in 30-year fixed mortgage rates added approximately $3,000 per month to the debt service on a typical $2 million home, effectively pricing out leveraged buyers. Consequently, active luxury inventory jumped by 60%, forcing 45% of active sellers to execute formal list price reductions. Multiple listing service records showed that properties that did manage to close were settling at an average of 9% below original asking prices, illustrating the systemic leverage shift toward buyers. In Denver, Colorado, the problem manifested as an inventory surge accompanied by steep property tax reassessments. Data from the Denver Metro Association of Realtors revealed a 48% increase in active upper-tier property inventory over a 12-month span, while Zillow metrics showed median days on market jumping by 85%. State tax reassessments, based on peak pandemic valuations, resulted in property tax bill increases averaging 35% statewide. Facing steep property taxes and escalating heating and maintenance costs for sprawling foothill estates, luxury sellers attempted to offload properties into a market where high-end condo sales had already dropped by 32%. MLS reports indicated that 70% of successful closings involved substantial seller concessions, including direct interest rate buy-downs and closing cost credits. In Boston, Massachusetts, legislative policy became the dominant driver of market paralysis. The introduction of proposed municipal transfer taxes on sales over $2 million created an immediate chill across historic neighborhoods like Beacon Hill and Back Bay. The Massachusetts Association of Realtors recorded a 30% drop in high-end transaction volume, while Zillow tracking showed average price reductions on properties listed above $3 million, averaging $400,000. Days on market stretched to 130 days, while federal tax data cited by Bloomberg showed a 22% increase in the outward migration of high-income taxpayers to low-tax jurisdictions like Florida and New Hampshire. In Sedona, Arizona, the collapse centered on the short-term vacation rental sector. AirDNA Market Analytics confirmed that average occupancy rates for luxury short-term rental properties fell by 45%, driven by shifting consumer travel preferences and increased national competition. Active listings for luxury homes priced above $1.5 million doubled, rising 100% year-over-year. As cash flow turned negative for leveraged investor owners, distress selling escalated, pushing median luxury sale prices down by 18% and forcing nightly rental rate reductions of 25% across the market. In Nashville, Tennessee, speculative overbuilding in the luxury segment produced a massive supply glut. Greater Nashville Realtors reported a 65% surge in luxury inventory, dominated by newly constructed modern residences. Out-of-state buyer inquiries crashed by 40%, leaving new builds on the market for an average of 95 days. According to Redfin, 55% of active luxury listings were forced to execute price cuts, with average seller concessions reaching $50,000 per transaction. In Los Angeles, California, the rollout of Measure ULA imposed a 4% transfer tax on real estate sales over $5 million and a 5.5% tax on sales over $10 million. A research report published by the UCLA Lewis Center for Regional Policy Studies documented that overall transaction odds for properties priced above the $5 million threshold dropped by nearly 50% in the months following implementation. Redfin recorded a 68% crash in sales above $5 million, while Zillow reported luxury inventory sitting on the market for an average of over 150 days. Sellers resorted to non-traditional marketing incentives, including offering luxury vehicles and elevated agent commissions to offset the tax impact. In San Francisco, California, the luxury condominium sector experienced severe capital erosion. Redfin reported that high-end condo values fell by 25% from their peak, driven by remote work policies and corporate relocations. IRS migration data revealed a net loss of over 50,000 high-income households from the metro area. Downtown luxury condo supply expanded to an extraordinary 22 months of inventory, with Wall Street Journal reports noting that 30% of downtown luxury sales were closing at a direct financial loss to the seller. In Austin, Texas, the market underwent the most severe correction in the nation. Local appraisal district data and Redfin market metrics confirmed that luxury home prices in hyper-speculative tech corridors fell by up to 51% from their 2022 peaks. Zillow reported a 110% surge in active luxury inventory, with average time on market increasing by 120 days. Institutional investor purchases dropped by 65%, while cancelled contract rates on high-end new construction reached 30% as buyers abandoned earnest money deposits to escape deteriorating asset valuations.